Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. Then we run you through the fan Q&A later in the show where we answer fans' questions. We do the show each and every single Sunday. Uploads on Monday, so if you like that, hopefully go check out the channel. Very interesting day today. And this first news story is our NFL draft order update. Because this is a very interesting game. Obviously, both of these teams that played today were competing for the number one spot. And what a weird game, by the way. And I really don't think it matters who gets the number one spot, to be honest with you. I really don't think. I have a very... I'm one of those people who thinks Tua or Burrow, regardless of who you get, it's going to be it should be a good thing. Both of them, I think, are going to be really good quarterbacks. But so I think it doesn't really matter to me who gets the number one overall pick. Because either way, you should get a pretty good prospect. But this is your updated NFL draft order. The Bengals sit at number one spot, and that's where they will sit until the draft comes around, I should say. The Washington Redskins are 2. The Detroit Lions are 3. The Giants are 4, and the Dolphins are 5, which is interesting because the Giants beat us. But I guess strength of schedule trumps the fact that they beat us. Not really sure how that works. But, it's really weird because if the Redskins won, then we would be 3, right? Or 4? Very confused on how the draft order works, but really interesting stuff. The fact that the Lions have leapfrogged us this bad. Again, when you look at the draft order, if you're a fan that's concerned, the only team that you have to worry about taking a quarterback is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Washington Redskins aren't taking a quarterback. The Lions would be, they have Stafford's under a big contract. They would have to make some moves before the draft, but as of right now, they're not taking a quarterback. The Giants have Daniel Jones, who they just drafted, and he looks like to have an interesting future. So the only team that would take a quarterback would be the Bengals. And they can only take one, obviously. So, like I said, if you're a Dolphins fan and you're worried about that, I think Tua is still the best quarterback in this draft. And I know he has a bad injury history, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was a Dolphin. So I think regardless of what happened today, it's not going to hurt the future of this team. All right, so let's move on from that. And to be honest with you guys, that was it. That was the only real news story of the day, was the updated draft order. We had some things about Josh Rosen talking about how he's not ready, he doesn't deserve to play, stuff like that. But one thing I will say before we move on from the Josh Rosen story, and the story is discuss our Pro Football Reviewers. Josh Rosen on starting and his NFL future. Basically, he's like, I'm still young, all this other stuff. It really doesn't, matter. But the thing I want to bring up is the fact that he's been able to sit behind Fitzpatrick and see how he's dealt with the situation, the way he plays the game. He can never be the playmaker that Fitzpatrick is in terms of making people like a safety. Like, perfect example, he made, I think it was either Bates or Sean Williams. Someone was a safety, he was a DB blitz, and he makes a miss and he rushes for 15 yards. That's never going to be Josh Rosen. But he can learn a lot from Ryan from a pocket passer standpoint, where Ryan does a lot of things really, really, really well. And he's had a really good season. You can look at the stats. It's not that great. But the way he's played has been very impressive. And Josh can learn a lot from that. Not only from how to be a successful pocket passer, but also how to be a great leader in a locker room. Because, he's probably galvanized this locker room more than any other quarterback in probably 10 years. Other than maybe Chad Pennington. And even then, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is a better player than Chad Pennington was at that time. But, you can learn a lot from off the field and on the field from him. And maybe that helps his development. Because Josh Rosen is still a very talented player, I think. He just has a few things he needs to work on. And again, he's only 22 years old. He has a long career ahead of him, whether he's a backup or a starter. But he has a lot of potential, and he can learn a lot. And when I mean a lot from this season and how Fitzpatrick handled it and how he plays the game. All of that stuff you can learn from. And he could not have a better person in front of him. He literally couldn't, to help him out and help him be a better quarterback. So that's an interesting thing going into next season. I really hope the Dolphins keep Fitzpatrick And if they don't, that would be very unfortunate. I hope he wants to stay, because I could see a scenario where this team builds a more competitive roster, and even if our rookie doesn't play his first season, I think we could win some games with him under center. I think this is the best version of Ryan Fitzpatrick there's ever been, and he's definitely, I think he makes better decisions with the football than he ever has. I think he's in his prime. I think he's got a year or 2 years left in him where he can play at a pretty high level, and I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Granted, the Dolphins do have to make a move at quarterback. They have to figure out what they're going to do at the quarterback position, regardless. But this team could still be competitive in the division if they get a more competitive roster, if they do the right thing in the draft, and all the money all the draft capital on the money. If Ryan Fitzpatrick plays a season, I don't think any Dolphins fan would be mad at it. He's very entertaining to watch. He does his job very well, and he gives you a chance to win. And if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have won any of the games that we've won this year. And I cannot state enough of how good he's been all season long. He had another great game on Sunday. Granted, it wasn't the greatest team in the world, but he was consistent throughout the entire game. It's been a long time since we had a 400-yard performance in Sun Life Stadium. And again, I don't think it's the worst thing if he continues to be the quarterback next year. And like I said, Josh Rosen, if he's here and Ryan's not, hopefully took a lot out of what happened this season. And maybe that helps him in his development. But regardless, the Dolphins are going to draft a quarterback. And you know what? I hope Josh doesn't take that as a slight, and if he does, then he hasn't grown at all, because it's just competition. The beauty about the culture this team has set up, it doesn't matter where you were picked, and if you play well, you get on the field, and I think that is gonna help the Dolphins out a lot going down the road. So he should look at it as an opportunity more than anything. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the box score. The Dolphins are victorious, 38-35, in a very bizarre game. Now, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. It was even more bizarre for me. I had to basically, I couldn't, when the game was originally on from 1 to 4, I went to go spend time with some family, so I obviously came back and watched the game. I had no idea what the score was. I didn't know what happened in the game. I obviously went in dark, and I rewatched the entire game. And it was weird, because when I was going to watch it, it said 4 hours. I was like, so it had to have been a close game, or we went into overtime, which kind of sucked that I knew that the entire time. But I want to say, even in the fourth quarter, with 5 minutes left to go, when we were at 35-12, I legit thought that something had glitched out. Maybe it recorded for too long, or there were too many commercials, or something like that. I don't know. I was in utter disbelief the entire time. I was like, "There's no way that we're blowing them out. We're blowing them out of the water. There's no way they come back on us." And sure enough, in one of the craziest endings to a game I've ever seen, they somehow tie the game and it goes into overtime. One of the most insane games. I'll tell you guys the score again with 5 minutes left to go in the game. It was 35-12 with 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. That has to be a record. If they won that game, that has to be like the quickest comeback ever. They scored 14 points in 29 seconds. I think it was even more than... No, it was 14. Or maybe it was more than 14, actually. Because they had 2 2-point conversions, so it was 16 points. Like, it was insane. Like, this game was insane. I couldn't believe it. I'm sure you guys couldn't believe it either. I mean, good lord. But let's get into the game. And I really don't feel like the score does not... We dominated this game from... I mean, we got really lackadaisical at the end. And we made some bad decisions defensively, I felt like, at the end. In terms of, like, the Hail Mary that they caught. But other than that, I mean, we could not have let our foot off the gas pedal more than we did in this game. I feel like it's understandable because we were up by so much with so little time left. And I get it. I don't blame the coaching staff, and I don't blame the players, because what had to happen, I was thinking to myself, God wants us to lose. God wants us to have this first overall pick. Like, the stuff that happened at the end of that game is insane. So let's get into the offense. Before we do that, I do want to recap the ending of this game. They scored a touchdown. They go for 2. They get an onside kick. Okay. They throw a Hail Mary and catch it, and then go for 2 again, and then convert it again. I need to know the odds on that. That is insane. Not to mention the drive before where they scored another touchdown. This game was insane, dude. One of the weirdest endings to a game I've ever seen. So let's go into the score. Let's start with the defense. Andy Dalton finished 33 of 56 for 396 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Now, you look at the yards, you look at the touchdown total, and you look at the picks, you think, man, Andy Dalton carved the Dalton. No, he didn't. He had a very bad game until the last 5 minutes of the game. Joe Mixon, we did an insane job on Joe Mixon all day. He finished with 21 carries for 50 yards. Their leading receiver was Tyler Boyd, who had 9 receptions for 128 yards. Most of that was in garbage time, but he still had a good game. John Ross had 6 receptions for 84 yards. Those were the 2 leading receivers of the day. So I'll start with the positives on defense. Number 1, the game plan was awesome. We did a really good job on Joe Mixon. We did a really good job on their tight ends, which they utilize a lot. We didn't do a good job on them in the red zone, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But off-play action, anywhere else on the field, I feel like Eric Rowe did a really good job on them. He would have had a pick in this game, but I thought it was a bad call by the refs, that they said he kind of hooked him like between the hips. I thought it was just like a natural, like, he's just going by me. He just touched him, and he didn't like tug him or anything. I thought that was a really bad call. But Eric Rowe did a really good job on their tight ends. Our pass rush was the best it's been all year. Granted, the offensive line for the Bengals is terrible, but I think we've done some really nice adjustments on the front, where we rush Sam McGuavin a lot more. We do a lot of stunts with him, try to get him involved in the pass rush, and he's surprisingly good at it. Like, he's really, really good at it. And I feel like when you do some of that stuff with Vince Beagle and Sam McGuavin, they're really athletic, and they're very strong, powerful dudes. And they can do a variety of different pass rush moves because of that. And it gives offensive lines a lot of trouble when you rush them at the same time. Those have been the best spurts we've had in terms of being able to sack the quarterback. Christian Wilkins had a really nice day. He had a touchdown catch, which was awesome. And he also had a sack in this game. Like I said, overall, the pressure in terms of rushing the passer, this was by far the best game this defense has had. The secondary did well. I thought they were kind of inconsistent, but they did well. And the linebackers had another really nice game, despite not having Raekwon McMillan. Jerome Baker continues to impress, which is great. He's got both of those. The linebacker core is insane. I don't think the Dolphins should touch it at all. Sam McGuavin, I know he had this really good preseason, but I feel like the Dolphins have figured out a way to use him. He's very much like Jamie Collins, and I know people are going to be like, what, that might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm not joking around. Like, he's very versatile. You can drop him back in coverage. He's really good at rushing the passer, and that's kind of the same thing that Jamie Collins does for New England's defense. Maybe I think he's more athletic than Kyle Van Noy, but he does some of the same things that Kyle Van Noy does. In a way, he does them well. And I think that's one of the brighter spots of this season, where this young linebacker core is something that you can build around, and they have a bright future ahead of them. And it's good to see Sam continue, like, especially these last few weeks. Like I said, I feel like the Dolphins have figured out a way of utilizing him, and they're going to do, I'm assuming he's going to stay. I think he will. I think he's too talented to let go. But I think they have figured out a really cool way of having all three of them on the field at the same time. And I think you'll see that more of that next season. Again, I think that's something the Dolphins can build off of, and that continue to shine in this game against Cincinnati. The pass rush was great. some other notable performances. I thought Jerome Baker had a good game. I thought Sam McLaughlin had a good game. I thought Vince Beagle had a nice game as well. Sneak Needham had his ups and his downs, but he came up really clutch at the end of the game with a couple nice stops on some receivers and some nice pass defenses as well. So yeah, that pretty much breaks down the defense. The last thing I will say about the defense is the coaching staff has done an insanely good job with this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. It is ran as good as it could be, and that is something that I haven't said in a long time. And I don't think I've ever said it doing this show. I mean, that defense is coached as good as it could be. With all the players coming in and out of that game, all the personnel, all of it. It's getting this team ready to play on Sunday and to be that dominant on defense like they were, especially in the first half and in the second half. They just kind of let their foot off the pedal a little bit. I thought the coaching staff did too a little bit, and we'll end with that. The only thing I thought the defense struggled with, and the team as a whole didn't adjust to because they didn't think it mattered, but anytime they went spread in the red zone, the Dolphins' defense struggled. Anytime, and again, all you guys know what spread is, but they were able to take advantage of widening out our defense and getting favorable matchups with lesser players. And you can't do as many creative things especially in coverage when you spread a team out like that. You got to be kind of basic in a way, especially if you play man coverage. You can't, but you could probably still, I don't even think you could really get away with like a cover one robber, depending on how many people are on the field, but it does stress out your defense, and if you don't have talent, it's a very favorable matchup for and if you don't have a really dominant pass rush, that can spell very bad news for you in the red zone especially, and they were able to take advantage of that. That's the only thing the Dolphins defense struggled to adjust to, because it was it happened earlier on in the game, but at the end of the game especially, and I don't think the coaching staff really did anything to we got to stop this, because we had such a big lead that I felt like it wasn't that big of a deal to them. But that is something that I noticed towards the end of the game, that they utilized a lot to move the ball, and in the red zone they were very successful with it, spreading us out, and I just didn't feel like we did a good enough job to match it or get out of some bad looks. But other than that, I thought the coaching staff did a really good job. And again, it was at the very end of the game when you're up 35-12. I don't think the defensive coaches were like, we have to, to adjust to stop this. I didn't think that, they didn't think it meant that much, and I get that. So it really wasn't on anybody. It was just a crazy ending of the to this game. And offensively, this was a really good performance by Ryan Fitzpatrick. He finished 31 of 52 with 419 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception, with a lot of drops today by his receivers. Myles Gaskin led the team in rushing. He had 16 carries for 55 yards and a really, really nice touchdown. Devontae Parker continues his dominance with 5 catches, 111 yards, 22 yards a catch, and a touchdown. Mike Gesicki continues to be on the up and up with 6 grabs for 82 yards, averaged 13 yards a catch, and he had 2 tubs on the day. Albert Wilson continues to get his health back, and it's very noticeable. He was able to do a lot in this game, especially from the slot. He had 7 grabs for 79 yards receiving. And Isaiah Ford, he had 5 catches for 68 yards. I want to talk about Isaiah Ford first, and then we can talk about everybody else. But Isaiah Ford makes the Dolphins look really stupid right now, because they just paid all his money. It wasn't a lot of money, but they paid Allen Hurns, and Isaiah Ford might drive him out of Miami. I'm not joking around. He's a very, very, and we talked about this when he was drafted. He's always been a talented receiver, but if you watch the Dave Hyde and Omar Kelly show, they talk about how Isaiah Ford is basically a coach on the team, how he knows the playbook in and out. He teaches how the receivers to run crisper routes. He teaches them about what routes to run in the playbook. And that amount of knowledge of the game helps him. And he has really good talent, too. He's got great hands. He's the reason, he came up so clutch in this game. And I really should, I think people need to start really recognizing him every time he gets especially this season, anytime he's gotten a significant amount of playing time, he's taken he's taken advantage of it to its fullest. And I think he's someone that can have a very successful career here and can hopefully continue to build on that, because he fits this offense to a T, and he also could bring us a more consistent slot receiver that we haven't seen in a long time, to match with like a Preston Williams and a Devontae Parker on that outside, who are two very dominant players on that outside. You put Isaiah Ford in the slot. You bring in Albert Wilson every once in a while. It's a very dangerous offense, and he has me excited for the future for him especially. He's a very good player, and I think he's got a very bright future. Devontae Parker continues to be just dominant. Not even just good, but dominant. Especially early on in that game, he was going crazy. The Bengals just could not guard him. And it was awesome. Some of his catches were crazy. He had 5 catches for 111 yards, like I said, and he averaged the biggest at 22 yards a catch, and he had that 1 touchdown. And he continues to be consistent and dominant, and I'm so happy the Dolphins extended him because he deserves it. Mike Gesicki had a really good game until the very end. He had a couple of really costly drops. Not even just a couple. He had like 3 costly drops in this game that you would like to see him catch. But he continues to have his development go through the roof. He would have had over 100 yards receiving in this game if some of those balls were caught. And he just continues to go in the right direction. And again, it was good to see Albert Wilson kind of look like the older Albert Wilson, especially in this game. He's slowly starting to get it all back, which is awesome. And again, last but not least, but Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, just a insanely good job by him and what he was able to do. I mean, the game should have been over. We dominated the entire game. And even the first drive in overtime, he throws a great pass to Mike Gesicki up the seam, and it was just an unfortunate drop. But he just continued. I mean, this is his 4th team or his 5th team that he's had 4 touchdowns in a game. And he had 400 yards. He did a really nice job avoiding pressure, making plays on the run. And he had a couple lasers in there. The slant, I would have to go. I don't know if it was a slant or some kind of crossing route coming across the field. And Albert Wilson goes up the sideline with it. That was just a laser. Like he had a few really good throws. He throws better in a warmer environment, because in New York it just didn't have the same pop. He was missing a lot of throws in that weather. I don't know if it's the weather. I don't know what it is, but he's a way better thrower in Miami than or just in a warmer environment or an indoor stadium than he is in like MetLife or even Buffalo. I don't know why, but I don't know if it's because he's older or what's going on there, but yeah, he threw some lasers in this game. Offensively, in terms of the scheme, I thought we did a really good job when the defense was into zone coverage, where we just diced it up. Like a lot of our route concepts and our combos, our route combinations were really nice. And it was consistent too. Anytime they went to zone, we shredded them. And when they went to man, we struggled a little bit, especially when they sent pressure. But I thought even in those situations we did okay. And again, I think that's a testament to Chad O'Shea, and his offense is really nice. It's very versatile, and which is a good thing. It's adaptable too, and we've seen that over the evolution of this offense and how much better the offensive line has gotten, and what they've figured out what this team does well, and that's passing the football. It's by far the best thing they do on offense, and they realize that, and they continue to even get better at it as the week's gone on. So just a real tip of the cap to the coaching staff. They did a really good job with this team this season. I know it's almost over, and I cannot wait for this team to this coaching staff to get a better roster. It's going to be sick. It's going to be sick. Because, when you look from top to bottom, there's a lot of people in that building that develop talent really well, and they proved it this season with all these players just getting better week to week, and it's been very impressive. Even Ryan Fitzpatrick, I really do believe this is the best I've ever seen him play on any team. I know his stats don't show that, But earlier on in the year, he had some bad turnovers, but for the most part, he hasn't. All of his turnovers have been explainable. They weren't like why would you throw that? I mean, he's had some missed throws this season, but he's not that old, like, boneheaded, gunslinger who throws, like, some of the most blind. He's not that anymore. I really do believe he has, like a Pro Bowl level season left in him, wherever he goes. So all of those things are great, and the Dolphins have a lot of things that they need to figure out, but this team and this organization especially this coaching staff, has a very bright future, and it gets me excited. Just you could just tell, especially if you've watched Dolphins teams for a long time, the preparation for each game is different. The game plan is different each game, and the development of the players, I think, is the most impressive thing that this team has, or this coaching staff has accomplished. And that's what this coaching staff is for: developing players. It's easy to coach LeBron James. It's easy to coach some of the players who already know what the heck they're doing. But the great ones develop talent, and then they become great. And they've done a really good job of that. And I think we're going to get a lot more of that down the road. And that concludes the box score, ladies and gentlemen. Again, one of the weirdest games I've ever seen, because I've never seen a team just get blown off the field like they did and somehow conjure some witch magic at the end of that game. Because, good lord, that was insane, dude. Alright, let's get into the fan Q&A, where we answer fans' questions. And I apologize if you hear a pug snoring in the background. There's nothing I can do about that. Very tired. Been a long weekend. Haven't got a lot of sleep. So this might not be... That's not because I'm tired, but this might not be the longest episode just because of the lack of content. I can't wait for the offseason, dude. I'm so hyped for the future of this team, dude. I am so hyped. Very, 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 very excited. All right, let's get into the fan Q&A. Dang, since last time I checked, we got 10 more questions. This first question comes from TR3MC. He says, "Do you think it's do you think it's a for sure thing that the Miami Dolphins coaching staff will draft a quarterback? Hang on, excuse me. With their first pick in the draft. If not, what position do you think they're focusing on with the first pick? I think they can, depending on how the draft goes. I don't think you're going to get to see. I don't think you'll see a pass rusher. Maybe you will. But if it's not a quarterback, because I don't. There's not a chance Chase Young's going to be there for them to select. So I think it's going to be one. If I had to guess, it would be either an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. I just don't think, and I need to watch more. But no one really comes to mind in terms of a pass rushing threat that is worthy of that high of a pick, and can fill the shoes of what the team needs them to be. Because if the pass rusher that they take needs to be an average, for sure an average, but above average player that can do it all, pass rush at the edge, all of that stuff. And so yeah, I think if I had to guess, it would be the trenches. Excuse me. This next question comes from Mark. Mark asks, "I've never seen a team that stands at 3-11 play with so much heart and still appear to be having fun. Do you agree? And do you think the team is buying into the coaching staff's plan for the future?" That, to me, is the biggest testament to this coaching staff and what they've been able to accomplish. Keeping this team loving the game, fighting hard every week, just having fun, and it's awesome. The most down I've seen this team was last week against the Giants. That's the most down, and I think it was because they were coming off a bad loss. They were still up in New York, and I think a lot of that had to do with it, and that's the most sluggish I've seen them. But yeah, they have a lot of fun, and I was thinking the same thing when I was watching Ryan Fitzpatrick. I guarantee you if you asked him like where this ranks in terms of some of the most fun he's had on a team, this would be pretty high up there. I really do think he's enjoyed his time here, and his team is enjoying it, and a big credit goes to the coaching staff to be able to do something like that for this team and keep them focused and happy like that. It's a very difficult thing, especially when you're losing every single week, but they play hard every week like they can win, and I think the coaching staff has done a really good job of of that, and I think it's a good sign that they are a good coaching staff. And again, I'm very excited for the future and what the future really holds for this team and this organization, because I think it's going to be awesome. One thing I'll say before we move on is, one thing I will say that this team nailed. Number one, they found their coach for the future. Finally, after many years, we found him. And I think that's the biggest accomplishment of this season. Number two is player progression. And that obviously goes into the fact that Brian Flores is such a good coach, because he's been able to develop some of these players as well as he has. And, and it just gives me a good feeling going into the offseason with this much capital to do major things and be a very successful team for a long time. So next question comes from Jack Pack. Jack Pack says, what was the point of drafting a fullback if they're going to play a DT there? A DT that couldn't catch Andy Dalton and let the game go to OT. I wouldn't even say that. I get where you're coming from, and I agree that Chandler Cox was underutilized a lot. But I will say this, and this is why he was. The team realized that we just can't run the ball. With him not in the lineup, this team can't run the ball. And we became a pass-first team, and that's what we've been best at. So I think that's why you've seen him, especially not just the last few weeks, but all year, not get that much playing time. Excuse me. This next question comes from SM. SM asks, going to get the entire GM staff fired or going to own the draft? We trade up from the 4th pick to the 2nd pick and select Chase Young. It costs us a first. With our remaining first, we take Jordan Love. Do you like? It's not terrible. I wouldn't be mad at it. I would be actually okay with that. But it's not something that I think I would do. I think that's too much of a risk. I think, again, I don't think that scenario is going to happen, but you have to take a quarterback. And you do in that scenario, but I think you can take one and still really fill out your roster without having to give up any of your high-value picks. This next question comes from Richard. Richard asks, how about the Dolphins drafting the Wisconsin center with our 3rd-round pick to definitely help our running game out and more physical at the line? Yeah, I need to watch more college football, and I usually do, especially like a month ahead of the draft, and we talk about that on the podcast, but I would have to watch them more. But Wisconsin always does develop really nice talent. But yeah, that's something the Dolphins need to invest in, is the line of scrimmage, and I hope they take as many linemen as they can. The next question comes from David. David asks, at this point in the season, I believe Fitzpatrick is our starting quarterback next year. If we draft Tua, he'll need to sit, and I don't see a better free agent option unless Stafford shakes free. Do you agree? And what are Tort had thoughts on that? I don't know what you mean. What are your thoughts? You meant your, but you had a T there. I'm sorry, that confused the heck out of me. At this point, I believe that Fitzpatrick, sorry, David, our quarterback next year, if we draft Tua, he'll need to sit. I don't know if Tua needs to sit, but he is injured, and again, I think that just is a beautiful thing. If we take Tua and he's not ready to start the season, then I would sit him the entire year and just let him, you need a redshirt this season, learn as much as you can, and who's better to learn from than him? And meanwhile, Ryan Fitzpatrick is still progressing the team and progressing the culture, which he has been a big part of that, and continues to play. And again, I think this is the best version of him. Tampa Bay Dolphins version of Ryan Fitzpatrick has been the best version of him. And I think no Dolphins fan would be upset with that, because you're still getting good quarterback play, which you really haven't gotten in the last 10 years. And you're also developing the quarterback of the future at the same time. I think that's a great scenario for the Dolphins, and I do agree with that. This next question comes from Gamerific. Gamerific asks, I've been in love with Isaiah Ford since he was drafted. What are your thoughts? Yeah, he's played amazing, dude. Like, he has a very bright future, and like I said, it kind of makes the Dolphins look stupid because of they paid Allen Hurns to do some of the things that Isaiah Ford has done, and Isaiah Ford not only looks more explosive, but his route running is better, and he has great hands too. And yeah, Isaiah Ford has played very well the last few weeks. This next question comes from SM. SM says, GM Skaggs, we draft Sua and re-sign Fitzpatrick the second day of the draft. You receive a call from the New England... Hang on a second. You receive a call from New England offering you a third-round pick for Josh Rosen. Do you do the deal? Yes. Yes. Because I have so much faith in Tua. I've seen Fitzpatrick for a year. That's a great quarterback room, and I'm willing to continue with that. If I get an extra third-round pick for Josh Rosen, that's awesome. And I think that would be the move for the Dolphins for sure. This next question comes from Mark. Mark says, today DP topped 1,000 yards after being labeled a bust. Can you provide insight to his turnaround this season? He's making jaw-dropping catches almost every single game. He does. Number one, the coaching staff is way better. The game plans have been specific and to the players' strengths. That's the biggest thing. They put their players in positions to make plays. Not only that, but the development of the offensive line, mixed with the smart situational football that the Dolphins put their offenses in, really lets Devontae Parker able to get downfield, coupled with the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick throws a very good 50-50 ball. All of those things have been the reason for his turnaround. Like I said, the coaching staff has done a great job of developing some of these players that have not met expectations, and they're meeting those expectations now because they put them in positions to do what they do best. And I think, that's something that they talk about a lot. That's something that New England has done for, ever since the Bills have been there. They don't ask players to do what they're not comfortable with, and they think of creative ways to get them involved and utilize their talents to the best of their abilities. Most offensive coordinators in the league craft their offense to what they do well. That's why you're like, oh, Adam Gase, he picks the groceries. He wants to find players that he thinks fits his scheme. What Chad O'Shea does and this coaching staff does, they look at what they have and they craft their offense around who they have. And that is the best way to do it. Look at what the Ravens are the perfect example of that. They realized who they had. They went out and got someone who knows how to run a scheme that fits his skill set, and they're the best team in the league because of that. And that is why not only has the development been on the uptick, but some of these players have played better, is because they are put in positions to succeed, and they're not put in positions where they're not comfortable. This next question comes from Jagpack. Jagpack asks, Myles Gaskin was running well. Is that just because Bengals are trash, or do you think they have found a potential starter? No, there was a lot of times where he was popped and he kept fighting. He showed a lot of explosion and balance in this game. I think because of the poor run blocking on this team, since he's so small, he can kind of get lost in the trash sometimes, and he kind of pops out. And we saw that a couple times in this game. Yeah, he's a hard runner. He's an explosive runner. And I think the Dolphins have found a little something there. This next question comes from Josh. Josh asks, Skaggs, I really like Coach Flores. I believe he can be our version of Mike Tomlin or better. What are your thoughts on Coach Flo? I share the same. I really like him. And I didn't like him at first. When he was hired, I was like, well, I would have rather had Chris Richard. And if I was making the decision of the team, this team would be in a very bad place right now because they nailed it with this pick. And it's like, thank God, because, finally we got someone who's competent and knows what the heck they're doing, and we see actual improvement, and especially late in the year, instead of regression, where the team before was super inconsistent. Again, when he gets a competitive team, it's going to be scary, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very excited to see what that looks like. This next question comes from SM. SM asks, what are your thoughts on all of these no-name players that the Dolphins the no-name players on the Dolphins lately? Is it too early to go buy a jersey? Yeah, I wouldn't buy any of their jerseys. But yeah, again, that's another just a really good job by the coaching staff to get those players ready week in and week out. This next question comes from SM. SM asks, Fitzpatrick throws the best 50-50 jump ball I've seen in a while, which if we roll next year with Parker, Preston on the outside, and Mike G running through the middle, comes in extremely valuable. Can the jump ball be taught? Who from college throws a good jump ball? Tua's the best deep ball thrower in college football. He's a really good deep ball thrower. Tua throws a insane 50-50 ball. Tua definitely throws the best one. I would say 2 would probably be Joe Burrow, and then Jordan Love is somewhere in there. He's good at it too. He's just a little bit. He throws a really pretty ball. I would say those 3 are the best at it. This next question comes from David. David says, thoughts on what's his name? Sealer? I think his name's Sealer, right? The new guy. Man, I know it's the Bengals, but the dude looked amazing. Interior penetration and push on every snap. Yeah, I think that was just the Bengals. I'd like to see him do that against a better offensive line. But, yeah, he played very well. This next question comes from Edward. Edward asks, do you think that was a catch by the tight end in the game? And do you think the coaches that we got with the work they done is going to pick the right in the draft the best players because of the players that we got, and they got them playing with little talent? Thanks for answering my question, and thank you for doing a good job informing us about the Dolphins. I appreciate that. Your question is, do you think that was a catch by the tight end in the game? And do I think it's a catch? What was it? I can't remember what you're talking about. I know there was a catch in the game that I felt like they should have challenged, and they didn't. But I can't remember. Maybe it was Mike Gesicki. And do you think that the coaches that we got with the work they done is going to? Yes. Yes, I do. I think all of those things. Yes, I do. So this question comes from SM. SM says, Mr. Skaggs, let's talk NFL draft. If Cincinnati will let us go up to the number 1 for all 3 of our first-round picks for Joe Burrow, and they give us their second pick, do we do it? No. You hang the phone up and say, no, thank you. Tua Tagovailoa has just as good of a chance of Joe Burrow as being a great NFL quarterback. Tua is still my number 1, despite his injury history. This next question comes from Gamerific. Gamerific says, Isaiah Ford is looking kind of elite. What are your thoughts on him? He's a great slot receiver. And again, from what we've heard from the coaching staff and his physical gifts and his production, he's looked awesome, dude. And again, it's funny because Alan Hearns, they just signed him, and then Isaiah Ford is just doing his job better. This next question comes from Josh. Josh says, do you believe this organization will draft the right player regardless of where we pick in the first round? Yes. I am hopeful that will get done. Josh says, Skaggs, did you expect Devontae Parker to have this? No, I didn't expect Devontae Parker. I didn't even want him to come back. I was so upset about that season, dude. I didn't want him to come back. He was the most inconsistent player ever. And again, that's a perfect example of crafting your offense to what your players do best and your play calling. Adam Gase didn't do that. And that's why Devontae Parker has looked as good as he has. This next question comes from Gamerific. He says, are we a good organization? We'll have to wait on that. Let's see how this next draft comes in. Are we a good coaching staff? Yes. This next question comes from SM. SM asks, the Dolphins' last 3 first-round picks were Charles Harris, Minka Fitzpatrick, and Christian Wilkins. By next year, Harris may be gone, leaving just Wilkins. This seems to be the Dolphins' problem. Poor evaluation of blue-chip talent, but they have been excellent at signing undrafted free agents. How do we fix the Dolphins' issue? Just draft better. Chris Greer has gotten the past that he's been overruled on a lot of his picks over his time in Miami. That's been the reason why he stayed on. Plus him and Brian Flores and Chris Greer have a great relationship. But so far, what I will say about Chris Greer is, I don't know if he's ever been overruled in terms of undrafted talent, but he's nailed that ever since he's been the GM. He's found a lot of players that were undrafted, like good players. But yeah, the Dolphins need to do better, and Christian Wilkins is getting better. He had his best game of his career, I think, and I have faith that he can continue to develop. But by far the best first round pick this team has made in a long time. Now Devontae Parker has come around, but I would say Minka Fitzpatrick. But yeah, that again, they need to prove it. I definitely think they need to prove it, that they can be consistent with picking players, and they need to nail this. And I think they will. And it's the draft is going to be the most exciting draft, probably. I mean, in a very, like, the last 20 years of being a fan, I would say. I mean, I can't remember a more important one. And I don't mean that in terms of me being a fan. I mean that as a timeline, like 20 years of the Dolphins being a thing. Like, this is probably the most important draft because they have so much capital, and they have so much they can do with that, that it's awesome, and it's very exciting. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is your podcast for this week. What a day. What a day. What a game. And, just what a game. What a crazy game. And again, I think this team dominated. Just things, Zeus, some other power was messing around at the end of that game, because it was crazy, dude. How they were able to get, again, the score was 35-12 with 5 minutes left to go. That's, you don't want to give up that lead. But yeah, we still got the W. And I forgot to say that it was really nice that how well the defense played at the end of that game. I thought it was awesome. I didn't bring that up. They did a really good job of getting 2 stops in overtime to win the game. So I'm Skagster1083, and I will see you guys in the next one.